Royal Guard BREAKS protocol for a little girl with cancer, and the moment was truly heartwarming. The palace was alive with the excitement of the day, as tourists from all over the world gathered to witness one of the most famous traditions, the ceremonial changing of the guards. The guards, dressed in their immaculate uniforms, stood motionless, their tall black hats adding to their imposing presence. Every movement was precise, every step measured, and every eye fixed forward. It was a display of discipline and honor, and everyone watching knew how important it was to the guards to maintain their solemnity and tradition. Among the crowd that morning was a little girl named Emily. Emily was small for her age, with delicate features and wide, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Today was a special day for her, not because it was a holiday or a birthday, but because she had always dreamed of visiting the royal palace and seeing the guards in person. There was something magical about the idea of soldiers standing perfectly still, their uniforms shining, their faces serious, and yet somehow protecting everyone with quiet dignity. To most people, it was just a ceremony, but to Emily, it was a chance to step into a world she had only imagined in her dreams. Emily's parents held her hands tightly, helping her through the crowd of visitors. They knew that the palace would be busy and that it might be overwhelming for her, especially because she was battling cancer. The disease had taken a toll on her small body, leaving her weak and tired more often than not, but her spirit remained bright and unbroken. Her parents were careful not to let her see the worry in their eyes, because they wanted her to enjoy this moment fully, to feel the excitement and wonder that every child should experience. Emily wore a small, sparkling crown that her mother had placed on her head, a simple gesture to make her feel like royalty herself. In her hand, she clutched a handmade card that she had colored and decorated with hearts and stars. It was a gift she had made for the guards, full of gratitude and admiration, though she was too shy to say it out loud. As they found a spot near the front, Emily's eyes grew wide with awe. The palace grounds stretched out before her, immaculate and majestic. The guards, standing at their posts, seemed almost unreal in their perfection. Their movements were synchronized and deliberate, their expressions calm and unreadable. Emily had watched videos of the changing of the guards before, but seeing it in person was a completely different experience. She could hear the soft crunch of their boots against the stone and feel the slight vibrations as they marched in perfect harmony. Her heart raced with excitement, and for a moment she forgot about her illness, about the treatments and hospital visits. In this moment, she felt like a normal little girl, full of wonder and joy. The crowd around her buzzed with chatter and the clicking of cameras, but Emily's attention was entirely on the guards. She watched as one of them turned slightly, the motion so precise that it seemed almost rehearsed for centuries. She noticed the way their eyes remained steady, scanning the crowd without really seeing the individual faces. Emily felt a pang of longing. She wanted so much to talk to them, to show them her card, to perhaps get a small smile or a nod in return. But she understood in her own way that the guards had rules. She had seen the signs that warned the public not to touch or speak to them, and she knew that approaching too closely would not be allowed. Even so, she edged a little closer, her small hand tightening around the card, hoping that maybe just this once, something extraordinary could happen. Her parents watched her carefully, smiling gently but also feeling protective. They knew how much Emily loved moments like this, moments that could transport her away from the harsh reality of her illness. They had spent years trying to give her small joys like this, trips to parks, small celebrations, quiet afternoons reading her favorite stories. But this was different. This was grand, magnificent, and unforgettable. Emily's father knelt beside her for a moment, whispering encouraging words. "Just enjoy the moment, Emily," he said softly. "Watch carefully, take it all in. You're doing so well." Her mother adjusted her tiny crown and brushed a strand of hair from her face, her eyes glistening with pride and quiet sadness. They had both learned over the years that life could be fragile, and that every small moment of happiness was precious. As the ceremony continued, Emily's attention was caught by one particular guard. He was taller than the others, his uniform perfectly fitted, and his posture impeccable. But it wasn't just his appearance that drew her in. There was something in the way he moved, a subtle gentleness in his stance that seemed almost out of place among the rigid perfection of the others. Emily felt a strange sense of connection, as if he were not just a soldier, but someone who could understand her heart without words. She clutched her card tighter, wishing she could somehow reach out, even though she knew she probably couldn't. Around them, the crowd was filled with tourists pointing cameras, children bouncing on their toes, and parents trying to keep their families together amid the excitement. Yet, in that moment, Emily seemed to exist in a bubble, a small world where only she and the guards existed. She imagined herself handing over her card, imagining the guard's eyes lighting up with appreciation. It was a simple, innocent wish, but it filled her heart with hope. She had faced so many difficult days, hospital visits and treatments, yet here she was, smiling, excited, and dreaming of a small act of kindness that could make her day unforgettable. Time passed slowly, each second stretching longer than usual. Emily's small fingers began to tingle with anticipation. She shifted from foot to foot, trying to get a better view without stepping into the forbidden area. Her parents noticed and gently held her back, understanding that she wanted to get closer but also knowing that rules were rules. They watched silently, their hearts full of both pride and worry. Emily had always been a brave child, facing challenges far beyond her years, yet in this moment her innocence shone brighter than ever. As the guards performed their precise routines, Emily continued to watch the tall guard. She noticed the smallest details, the shine on his buttons, the careful way he held his weapon, the rhythm of his steps. To her, he was more than a guard. He was a symbol of strength, discipline, and honor. She thought about how different his life must be, standing still for hours, following strict rules, and never showing emotion. And yet, she felt certain that behind that stoic expression, there was a heart capable of kindness, a heart that could see a little girl's dream and perhaps make it come true. The ceremony drew closer to its conclusion, and Emily's excitement grew. She whispered to her parents, asking quietly if it would be possible to give the guard her card. They smiled gently and told her that while rules usually prevented it, the important thing was that she had been able to witness something beautiful, something magical. Emily nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the guard. She felt a mixture of anticipation and longing, hoping for a small miracle. Even though she was tired from the hospital treatments and the weight of her illness, her spirit felt light and alive. Finally, as the ceremony reached its climax, Emily took a deep breath. She looked around at the crowd at the Grand Palace and at the guards who had held their perfect formation for so long. Her heart was full, not just with excitement but with a sense of hope. She knew that life was unpredictable, that every moment was precious, and that even small gestures could leave a lasting impression. In her mind, she imagined a world where kindness could break through even the strictest rules, where a small act of humanity could turn an ordinary day into something unforgettable. As the final movements of the ceremony concluded, Emily's gaze lingered on the tall guard one last time. She imagined herself stepping forward, handing him her card, and receiving a kind acknowledgement in return. It was a dream, simple and pure, yet it carried the weight of all her hopes and wishes. Her parents held her close, whispering words of encouragement, while she clutched her card tightly, ready for whatever small miracle the day might bring. And in that moment, as the sun continued to shine down on the palace grounds, Emily felt a spark of joy that went beyond words. It was a moment of pure wonder, of anticipation, and of hope, a moment that would stay with her forever, a reminder that even in a world full of rules and routines, there was always room for magic and kindness. The ceremonial movements of the guards were precise, almost hypnotic in their rhythm. Emily's eyes followed every step, every turn, every careful movement of the tall guard she had been watching since the beginning of the ceremony. He was a striking figure in his uniform, imposing yet somehow gentle in the way he carried himself. He stood perfectly still, yet to Emily, he seemed almost alive, as if he could sense the emotions around him. As she watched, she noticed something different. While the other guards maintained strict attention, his gaze occasionally seemed to drift, not in a careless way, but in a way that suggested he noticed more than he let on. He looked at the crowd not as a blur of people, but as individuals, each with their own stories. And when his eyes met Emily's, though she couldn't know for sure, she felt a small flicker of connection. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for Emily, it felt like the universe had momentarily paused just for her. Emily clutched her handmade card tightly. It was small, colorful, and full of hearts, stars, and little messages she had carefully written in her tiny, slightly shaky handwriting. She had spent days creating it, making sure every detail was just right. To her, it was more than a card. It was a piece of her heart, a way to say thank you to someone who seemed so much bigger than life itself. She had imagined giving it to the guard countless times in her mind. In her dreams, he would kneel down slightly, accept it, and smile, letting her know that even in a world governed by rules and protocol, kindness still mattered. Her parents noticed her fascination. Her father bent down beside her, gently brushing her hair from her forehead. "Emily, I know you want to give him the card, but remember the guards have rules," he said softly. "They can't usually talk to people or take gifts, even if they want to." In her mind, she held on to the hope that maybe today, the right reason would be her. The tall guard continued his duties, and Emily's attention never wavered. She noticed the tiny details, the careful way he held his rifle, the crispness of his uniform, the gentle sway of his hat as he shifted weight from one foot to the other. There was a rhythm to his movements, like a silent dance performed for years, perfected through countless ceremonies. But there was also something human in the way he occasionally adjusted a glove or straightened a strap. It reminded Emily that behind the armor and the stoic expression was someone who could see her, understand her, and maybe even care. Emily's mother leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "He looks very serious, doesn't he?" she said. Emily nodded. "Yes, but I think he's kind too," she replied confidently. "I can feel it." Her parents exchanged a quiet glance, a mixture of amusement and awe. Emily had always had a remarkable ability to sense the kindness in people, even when it was hidden behind a serious face or a formal role. As the ceremony progressed, Emily began to feel a growing sense of urgency. The guards were about to finish their routine, and she realized that this might be her only chance to connect with the one guard who had caught her attention. She edged a little closer, careful not to cross the invisible line that separated the guards from the crowd. The card in her hand seemed heavier now, as if it carried all of her hopes and dreams. The tall guard, meanwhile, had noticed her movement. He saw a small figure in a sparkling crown, holding something in her hands with a look of pure anticipation. Something about her made him pause for a fraction of a second, a pause so brief that most people in the crowd would have missed it. But he saw her, really saw her. He noticed the way her eyes sparkled despite her frail appearance, the quiet determination in her stance, and the tiny card clutched tightly to her chest. In that moment, the guard felt a tug at his heart. He had spent years following strict protocols, maintaining a stoic demeanor and upholding centuries of tradition. But he also knew that rules were meant to protect, not to prevent moments of humanity. And here was a little girl who had faced challenges he could barely imagine, standing before him with a simple wish: to be seen, acknowledged, and perhaps, for just a moment, cherished. He glanced at his fellow guards, each standing perfectly still, unaware of the tiny miracle unfolding in front of them. The routine continued, the ceremonial steps still precise, but his mind was elsewhere. He considered the implications of breaking protocol. Guards were trained to follow rules without question. Any deviation could be noticed, could even cause confusion. Yet as he looked at Emily, All the potential consequences faded into insignificance. What mattered was her smile, her joy, and the small opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. Emily, sensing that something unusual was happening, felt her heart skip a beat. There was a subtle shift in the guard's posture, a tiny acknowledgement that she could feel even without words. She glanced at her parents, who watched her with a mixture of pride and cautious concern. Her mother whispered, "Emily, maybe something special is about to happen." Emily's eyes widened, and a shy smile spread across her face. The guard's next movements were careful but deliberate. He adjusted his stance ever so slightly, leaning just enough to show a hint of engagement without fully breaking protocol. He kept his expression neutral, yet Emily could sense the kindness emanating from him. It was as if he were saying, without words, "I see you. I know you're here and I understand." Slowly, almost hesitantly, she stepped a tiny bit closer. Her parents held their breath, unsure what would happen next. The crowd around them continued to murmur and snap photos, oblivious to the delicate, magical connection forming between a little girl and a royal guard. In that brief moment, time seemed to stretch. Emily imagined herself handing over the card, imagining the guard kneeling slightly, smiling, and giving her a small gesture of acknowledgement. She pictured the joy on his face and the warmth in his eyes. Though it was only a dream in her mind, it felt incredibly real, and she knew deep down that miracles sometimes came in small, unexpected ways. The guard, aware of every subtle movement Emily made, felt a quiet determination rising within him. He reminded himself that sometimes the world needed a little kindness more than it needed strict adherence to rules. He thought of his own family, of moments in his life when small acts of compassion had made a lasting impact. And now, here was a chance to create a moment that Emily, and perhaps even he, would never forget. As the final notes of the ceremonial music echoed across the palace grounds, the guard made a small, almost imperceptible gesture. He shifted his weight, subtly breaking the rigid formation that had been maintained for decades, just enough to lean toward Emily. It was a tiny movement, but to Emily it felt monumental. She gasped softly, her eyes widening in disbelief. Could this really be happening? Was the guard really acknowledging her, really noticing her, really making space for her in his perfectly disciplined world? Emily's parents watched in stunned silence. They had never seen their daughter so captivated, so alive with anticipation. They knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Her father whispered a quiet prayer of hope, while her mother's eyes glistened with tears. They had prepared for many things in Emily's life, but this moment, this pure, unplanned magic, was beyond anything they could have imagined. Emily, sensing the opportunity, took a small step forward, her tiny hand clutching the card. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, her heart pounding like a drum. She could see the guard's eyes, calm yet attentive, and in them she saw a spark of understanding, a hint that her presence mattered more than the rules that usually governed the palace grounds. And in that suspended moment, everything else faded away. The crowd, the noise, the music, the grandeur of the palace. All that existed was Emily, the little girl with a handmade card and a heart full of hope, and the guard who had chosen, just for a fleeting instant, to recognize her courage, her joy, and her humanity. The air was filled with quiet anticipation. Emily's small fingers clutched her handmade card tightly, her heart thumping so loudly that she was certain the guard could hear it, even through his tall black hat and the polished steel of his uniform. She had watched him for so long that she felt she knew him in some unexplainable way, as if he were not just a figure of strict discipline, but a person capable of seeing her, of understanding the unspoken hope in her eyes. The guard, meanwhile, had made a subtle decision. He knew the risks. Guards were trained to follow rules without hesitation, to maintain the perfect image of order and discipline. Any deviation could be noticed, questioned, or even reported. Yet here in front of him was a little girl whose courage and spirit had touched him in a way he had not expected. She was small, fragile even, but her presence demanded attention. He could see it in her eyes, the way they sparkled despite her illness, the way her body leaned slightly forward with anticipation, the way her hand tightened around her card. For the guard, it was more than a moment of ceremony. It was a moment of humanity. He reminded himself that the essence of being a guard was not only about rules or appearances, but also about protecting and honoring life. And here was life, vibrant and precious, standing right in front of him. He took a careful, deliberate step forward, breaking the rigid line he had maintained for so long. It was barely noticeable to the crowd, but to Emily it felt like the world itself had shifted. Emily's eyes widened. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it really be happening? The guard was leaning toward her, his movements precise yet full of subtle kindness. She took a small, hesitant step forward, clutching the card as if it were the most important treasure in the world. Her parents watched, their faces a mixture of awe, pride, and quiet worry. They had taught Emily to respect rules and boundaries, yet they also understood that some moments were bigger than rules. This was one of them. The guard stopped just short of the line that separated him from the crowd. His eyes, calm and steady, met Emily's directly. In that gaze was acknowledgement, a silent communication that transcended words. He saw her courage, her excitement, her fragility, and most importantly, her hope. For a child who had faced so much in her short life, this small act of recognition meant more than anyone could measure. Emily felt her chest swell with happiness. Slowly, she held out the card, trembling slightly. Her fingers shook, not from fear but from the intensity of the moment. The guard did not reach for it immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, a subtle gesture that seemed to say, "I see you. I understand. This moment is yours." The crowd around them was unaware of the silent conversation taking place, focused on taking pictures and chatting quietly. But Emily and the guard were locked in a private world of understanding and connection. Emily's mother whispered softly, "Go on, Emily. He sees you." That small encouragement gave Emily the courage she needed. She stepped a little closer, careful not to cross any invisible boundaries, and extended the card. Her heart felt like it might burst. Every ounce of hope she had held for this day, every wish she had whispered in her mind, converged into this single gesture. The guard leaned just slightly forward, enough to meet her halfway without fully breaking protocol. His hands remained still, yet there was an unmistakable softness in his posture. He allowed Emily to place the card gently on the edge of his stand. It was a small, simple action, but to Emily, it felt monumental. Her card, full of hearts and stars, now had a home in the presence of someone she admired so deeply. A gasp of delight escaped Emily's lips. The guard, despite his stoic training, gave a tiny nod, just enough to convey acknowledgement and respect. That nod, subtle though it was, lit up Emily's face like the sun breaking through a cloudy sky. She could hardly believe it. This moment, which she had dreamed of countless times, was real. She had given a part of herself, and it had been recognized. The crowd began to notice the slight deviation in the guard's movements. Cameras clicked, tourists whispered in surprise, and some even pointed. Yet none of this mattered to Emily. She was completely absorbed in the moment, in the connection between her and the guard. Every worry, every fear, every thought of illness or treatment faded away. For these few minutes, she was not a sick child, not a patient in a hospital. She was simply Emily, a little girl who had made a connection that would last a lifetime. Her father's hand rested gently on her shoulder and he whispered, "Look at her, look at what she's done." Her mother's eyes glistened with tears. They had seen Emily face countless challenges, but this moment was different. It was pure joy, untainted by fear or pain, a memory that would remain in their hearts forever. The guard, aware of the attention from the crowd, maintained his composure. Every action was measured, but every small gesture carried meaning. He allowed Emily to touch the card, allowed her to place it carefully, and in that act he communicated something far greater than words could express. That even within the strictest rules, there was room for kindness, compassion, and human connection. Emily smiled widely, her eyes shining with gratitude. She had expected many things when she came to the palace that day. She had expected to see the guards, to hear the ceremonial music, to feel the grandeur of the palace. But she had never imagined this. She had never imagined that someone so disciplined, so bound by tradition, could notice her, acknowledge her, and allow her a moment of true happiness. The guard straightened once more, returning to his original position, but the magic of the moment lingered. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a joy so deep that it seemed to fill every corner of her being. She had been seen, recognized, and valued not for her illness, not for her limitations, but simply for being herself, a brave, hopeful little girl. Around them, the crowd began to applaud softly, sensing that something extraordinary had happened. Cameras continued to click, but now they captured not just a ceremony, but a story of human kindness. Emily's parents smiled through tears, knowing that this small act of compassion had created a memory that would outshine all others. Emily's mind raced with emotion. She thought of all the days spent in hospitals, the treatments, the fatigue, and the fear. And then she thought of this day, this moment, when a royal guard had broken through the boundaries of protocol to share a fleeting, perfect connection. It was proof that even in a world full of rules, there was always room for heart, for understanding, and for simple acts of goodness. The guard's gaze met Emily's one last time before he resumed his strict ceremonial posture. There was a quiet dignity in that glance, a silent message that he had shared something meaningful with her, and that he would remember it just as she would. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy and wonder. She clutched her card close to her chest, feeling as if it had transformed into a symbol of hope and courage. Her parents embraced her gently, sharing in the overwhelming happiness of the moment. They whispered words of pride and love, knowing that Emily had experienced something extraordinary. For a child who had faced so much, this small, simple interaction had provided a powerful reminder that kindness could exist anywhere, even in the strictest, most disciplined environments. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Emily lingered for a moment, savoring every detail of what had just happened. She remembered the soft nod, the gentle acknowledgement, the way the guard had allowed her card to rest on his stand. These were small actions, almost imperceptible to others, but for her, they were monumental. They were proof that bravery, hope, and a pure heart could touch anyone, anywhere. The tall guard returned fully to his ceremonial duties, blending once again into the line of perfectly disciplined soldiers. But the memory of the moment stayed with him, too. He had followed the rules for years, upheld traditions without question, and yet he had discovered the profound impact of a small, compassionate choice. In recognizing Emily, he had created a memory that would live far beyond the palace walls. Emily walked away with her parents, her heart full, her spirit light. She had experienced something magical, something unforgettable. That single moment, the card, the gentle nod, the silent acknowledgement, would remain etched in her mind forever. It was a reminder that even in a world filled with rules and routines, there was always room for love, compassion, and human connection. And in that moment, Emily realized something important. No matter how small or fragile a person might seem, their presence could create ripples of joy and kindness. Her heart was full of gratitude, not just for the guard's gesture, but for the reminder that hope, courage, and a little bit of magic could exist in the most unexpected places. The day slowly began to wind down, and the grand palace grounds, which had been filled with tourists and excitement earlier, started to quiet. Emily walked hand in hand with her parents, her tiny steps light and unhurried. Every movement she made seemed to carry a glow of happiness, a newfound energy that only came from experiencing something truly magical. Though she was small and fragile, battling an illness that had shaped so much of her young life, Emily's spirit felt lighter than it had in months, if not years. The memory of the moment with the guard lingered in her mind, warming her heart like the gentle sun above. Her parents exchanged quiet glances, both holding a mix of awe, gratitude, and relief. They had watched their daughter face so many challenges, from hospital treatments to endless medications, and yet here she was, smiling, laughing quietly, and radiating joy in a way that touched everyone around her. They had never imagined that a simple visit to the palace, combined with a tiny act of kindness from a stranger, could have such a profound impact on her. Emily's father knelt slightly to match her height. "Emily," he said softly, "do you know what you just experienced? You made a memory that will stay with you forever." He really saw me. Her small hands clutched the card she had placed on the guard's stand, now slightly crumpled from the excitement of the moment but treasured beyond measure. Her mother smiled, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," she said gently. "And sometimes people we don't even know can make the world a little brighter. Today, he made your world brighter." Emily's face lit up at her mother's words, the truth of them sinking in with a deep sense of joy and gratitude. As they left the palace grounds, the family passed other tourists who were still talking about the unusual sight they had witnessed. Cameras had captured the brief interaction between Emily and the guard, and some of the photographs were already circulating quietly among the crowd. People whispered about the rare moment of compassion, marveling at the sight of a small child connecting with a figure of such rigid discipline. Emily, though, remained focused on her own happiness, savoring every detail of the experience rather than the attention it had drawn. Her parents decided to sit on a nearby bench for a few moments, allowing Emily to rest. She leaned back against her mother, still holding her card, her mind replaying every second of the encounter. She remembered the careful movements of the guard, the subtle tilt of his head, the tiny nod that had felt like the most important acknowledgement in her life. Even though the moment had lasted only a few seconds, it felt timeless. In that instant, she had felt seen, valued, and understood, a rare gift for anyone, let alone a young child facing serious illness. Emily's mother spoke softly, almost as if speaking aloud might shatter the memory. "You know, Emily, moments like that don't happen every day. It's a reminder that kindness exists, even in the most formal, serious places. And sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. I think he saw how brave I am, even if I'm small and sick, and I think he wanted me to be happy." Her parents nodded, tears welling in their eyes again. They had always known that Emily had a special spirit, one that shone brightly even when her body was weak, but seeing her joy now felt almost miraculous. Later that evening, as the family returned home, Emily carefully placed her card on her bedside table. It was no longer just a piece of paper with decorations and messages. It had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the power of small acts of kindness. She stared at it for a long time, her mind replaying the sequence of events, imagining the guard noticing her, the subtle nod, and the gentle acknowledgement that had made her day unforgettable. Emily's father sat beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "You know, Emily," he said, "sometimes the world can seem big and overwhelming, and there are rules that make it seem like magic or kindness can't happen. But today proves that it can. It really can. And I'll remember it forever." She closed her eyes briefly, imagining herself walking back to the palace, standing in front of the guard and feeling that same wave of happiness again. Though it had been a brief encounter, the memory had taken root in her heart, growing stronger with each passing moment. The following days brought a subtle ripple of attention. The few photographs captured during the palace visit were shared quietly on social media and among local news outlets. The image of a tiny girl holding her card toward a tall, stoic royal guard, who had allowed a fleeting, compassionate gesture, resonated with many. People marveled at the sight, calling it a reminder that even in a world governed by strict rules and formalities, humanity could shine through. Emily's parents watched these developments quietly, proud of their daughter, but also deeply moved by the fact that her small act of bravery and her encounter with the guard had touched so many hearts. Emily, however, remained blissfully unaware of the attention. To her, the moment had been deeply personal. It was not about fame or recognition. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, and experiencing joy that transcended the ordinary. She spent the next few days replaying the memory in her mind, smiling at the thought of the guard, imagining his kind eyes, and reliving the warmth of that simple gesture. The guard himself returned to his duties, resuming his role among the other soldiers. Yet, in the quiet moments between ceremonies, he thought of the little girl and her card. He remembered her sparkling eyes, the delicate way she had held her treasure, and the pure joy that had radiated from her. Though he had maintained protocol outwardly, inwardly he knew that small acts of kindness could have profound effects. That brief moment had reminded him of the human side of his role, of the power of empathy, and of the importance of noticing the people around him, even when rules seemed rigid. Emily's parents often found themselves reflecting on that day, talking quietly about how such a small encounter could have such a lasting impact. They marveled at the simplicity of the moment. A little girl with a handmade card, a royal guard willing to notice her, and a fleeting exchange that had become a lifelong memory. They understood that it was a reminder that life's most meaningful experiences were not always grand or elaborate. Sometimes, they were quiet, intimate moments of recognition and kindness. For Emily, the days following the palace visit were filled with a renewed sense of hope and determination. She approached her treatments with a little more courage, a little more optimism, remembering that there were people in the world who cared enough to notice her, to make her feel special, even for a brief moment. The memory of the guard became a source of strength, a reminder that despite the challenges she faced, there were always moments of beauty, joy, and connection waiting to be found. Her parents also carried the memory with them, feeling a renewed sense of gratitude for the simple yet profound joy their daughter had experienced. They often spoke about how the guard's small act had created a ripple of happiness that extended beyond Emily, touching not only their hearts, but also the hearts of others who had witnessed or learned about the story. The card Emily had placed on the guard's stand remained on her bedside table as a symbol of hope, courage, and the magic of human connection. Each time she looked at it, she was reminded that even small gestures could make a difference, that kindness could transcend rules, and that a moment of genuine recognition could have a lasting impact. And so, life continued with its routines, its challenges, and its small victories. But for Emily, her parents, and even the guard, that day remained etched in memory. It was a reminder that the world could be both strict and compassionate, formal and human, challenging and full of wonder. It was proof that even in the smallest, simplest moments, there was potential for joy, for connection, and for something truly unforgettable. Emily often told her friends about the palace, about the guards, and about the moment that had made her heart soar. She described the warmth she had felt, the kindness of the guard, and the magic of being seen. Her story inspired others, reminding them that even in the most rigid environments, compassion could shine through. And in her own quiet, resilient way, Emily carried the lesson forward. She continued to live with hope, courage, and a heart open to small miracles. She knew that life was unpredictable, but she also knew that moments of genuine kindness could happen at any time, often when they were least expected but most needed. The palace, the guard, and the card had all become symbols of a deeper truth, that in a world bound by rules, moments of humanity and warmth could create memories that would last forever. And for Emily, that memory would remain a shining light, a story to hold onto, and a reminder that even the smallest person could experience extraordinary magic.